Welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. We've just hit a milestone of 50,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel. Please, friends, share with your friends. YouTube.com/Jewish Gardens to subscribe to Worldwide Wisdom. This is where the action's happening. And it's around this round table here with my millionaires. This is where we make it happen. We just hit 1 million views on one of our videos, and we're looking forward to getting more of those big M's as we spread the light. Remember the mission statement of the Chabad movement. The mission statement is to spread the well springs outward. This is the mission of the Baal Shem Tov and every one of the Chabad successors of the Rebbes and the Hasidim, is to be able to take divine wisdom as it's taught to us in the teachings of Hasidus and to spread it everywhere, all over the world, even in the darkest of all places. And that is the theme of what we're going to talk about today. The theme of Purim. Ouch. The theme of Purim. That's what we're talking about. Folks, what does Purim mean to you? How personal is Purim to you? Harvey, I have a question for you. As you are doing alternate research, my question to you is, what is Purim? How personal? In other words, which is the most personal of the Jewish holidays? Which is the most personal Jewish holidays to you? Can anybody share your thoughts?
Yom Kippur.
Why is Yom Kippur personal to you?
Because I'm all by myself. I don't eat. I don't sleep. I'm sure all.
You don't need to sit next to your wife and hold her hand or something?
That's
No.
why I love Yom Kippur.
That's why you love Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, he loves Yom Kippur. Why? Thank you so much. He loves Yom Kippur because he sits by himself and he gets a chance to reflect, to meditate, to connect. Beautiful. I love that. How about you, Jen? What's your...
I would say the same thing.
You know how many people, it's an amazing thing. When I ask people the most enjoyable Jewish holiday, I can't believe it. They all tell me Yom Kippur. I can't believe it. Some say Pesach. It's amazing. The most difficult of the Jewish holidays are the ones that they love the most.
I like Shavuos because I was bar mitzvah.
Oh, he likes Shavuos because it's personal. That's in the end. It's bar mitzvah, mazel tov. Maybe you read the Torah this year in Shavuos. Okay, fine. So welcome to our guests, to our viewers online. Al from the West. And wow, Kolaiya. Nice to meet you. But somebody from Sri Lanka here yesterday. That's pretty cool. Okay, good. So post where you are, folks. We'd love to hear where you are around the world in worldwide wisdom. So, you know, it's interesting you said Yom Kippur because Purim is very similar to Yom Kippur. Why? Because Purim is, well, the full name of Yom Kippur is Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, the day which is of atonement, or it also means the day which is like Purim, Yom Kippurim, and Purim is obviously Purim. So there's an interesting connection, which I'm not really going to get into today, but what I'd like to talk about today. Oh, it's another interesting concept, very interesting concept. It says when Mashiach comes, the only Jewish festival that's still going to be around in practice is Purim. 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 Do you know that Purim is like the second most recent Jewish holiday? Think about it. Rosh Hashanah is the oldest Jewish holiday. It's the day of creation. It's as old as time itself, right? Yom Kippur happened in this week's Torah portion when the Jewish people sinned to the golden calf. This week's Torah portion, right? Mm-hmm. So Yom Kippur came as a result when Moses finally negotiated a truce, a ceasefire with God Almighty, right? A peace deal where 120 days later it took him to negotiate a peace deal, and that happened on the date of the 10th of Tishrei, which is the date of Yom Kippur. That is when God forgave the Jewish people. So Yom Kippur happened only 3,300 something years ago, right? 3327. Hanukkah is the most recent Jewish holiday, by the way, because Hanukkah happened in the days of the Greeks. A few years before Hanukkah is when the Purim story happened. So you're talking about 2,000, like 2,200 years ago is the Purim story, right? What's amazing about the Purim story, the silence is deafening when it comes to the Purim story because there is no miracle in the Purim story. It's like an embarrassment of a Jewish holiday. It's embarrassing. You know, Hanukkah has got a little respect, self-respect. He comes in, he's got his 8 days of oil burning. Can you make oil burn for 8 days? Seriously, imagine your cell phone is at 2%. 2% battery, right? You know what that feels like. You're like, I don't know how I'm going to breathe this 2%. And you wonder, like, how did we survive 50 years ago, 10 years ago? How did I survive? You get 2% battery. And
Wait, the miracle isn't that we survived? It's the old Jews.
well, hang on. So 2% battery, right? Imagine your 2% battery lasts for a week. That would be a miracle. That would be a miracle, right? If you're 2% battery. That's the Hanukkah story. The oil burned for 8 days. It's amazing. Every Jewish holiday, it's got a really nice miracle to represent it. right? You got Passover was very, very respectable, very impressive. It's got 10 crushing plagues, right? Very nice. Shavuos, God reveals the Torah, Mount Sinai. Sukkot, God protected us for 40 years. It's the longest Jewish holiday. 40 years, He protected us in the desert. It's amazing. Of course, Rosh Hashanah is the creation of the world. But Purim comes up and we're like, where do you fit in here? Where do you fit in? What happened at Purim? You got some crazy king agreed to genocide with his prime minister, right? And then the queen was there. They didn't know the queen is Jewish. Fine. They didn't know the queen is Jewish. So she told the king, by the way, he's trying to kill me. Oops, says the king. Let's kill him instead. Finished. That's the Purim story. It's not very, there's no jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring moment. So Fran from northern Florida here, she says that Esther was the miracle. Her life was planned to be there. Now, it's very important, Fran, to realize, and Torchwood, welcome from Nashville. Nice to see you. Folks, post where you are. It's nice to know where everybody is. Oh, Calais is in a hotel with Wi-Fi. Okay, fine. Very good. So what's interesting about the Purim story, and the fact that there is no miracle is manifest in many parts of the Purim story. For example, the Megillah is the only book in the Torah which does not mention the name of God. Now, this is by design, by the way, because when Mordechai and Esther wrote the Megillah, they intended it for it to be incorporated in the Chronicles of Persia and Media. It actually says that in the Megillah, that they intended it to be written, incorporated into like the books of the history, the Chronicles of Persia and Media. So they knew that if they were going to translate the Megillah into Persian, then what they would do is they were going to translate the name of God into their deity. So they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want to give credit to some other deity. That's why they deliberately omitted any reference to God from the Megillah. Nevertheless, since by divine providence the Megillah does not have the name of God, there's got to be a more fundamental message here as to why it is that this book is the one book of the Torah that's missing the name of God, and to why it is that this holiday is the only holiday that doesn't actually have an explicit miracle. And I'll get to your point, Fred, in a second. Also, even the name of the holiday. If you think about the names of all the Jewish holidays, the names of the holidays express the miracle. Think about it. Yom Kippur means the Day of Atonement, the day that God forgave. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year because God created time itself. Pesach, He passed over. Sukkot, He created shelters for us. Right? If you think about it, all the Jewish holidays manifest. Hanukkah is the name of inauguration, or the fact that they made peace on the 25th is the name of Hanukkah. But Purim actually expresses not the solution, but the problem. Think about it. Purim expresses the problem. The name Purim, what does it mean? Raffles, lots. It means lots. Right, the raffle that Haman threw, the dice that Haman threw in order to figure out which day to annihilate the Jews. Isn't that interesting? The name Purim expresses the problem, not the solution. I mean, seriously, can we reconsider the name of this holiday? How about if we called it Overwhelming Persia? I mean, that would be a nice way to call this holiday. Like, let's focus on the good. Why are we focusing on the problem, which is Purim, which really means raffles or randomness? Randomness, that's what Purim actually means. On the flip side, we notice that, like Steve pointed out, that Purim has an extraordinary benefit over the other Jewish holidays. When Mashiach will come, it's the one holiday that will outlive all the other Jewish holidays. It will still be celebrated with the coming of Mashiach. Also, the joy of Purim is far greater than the joy of any other Jewish holiday. Did you notice that? Every other Jewish holiday is supposed to be joyous. Very nice. On Sukkot, it says 3 times, you should only be joyous. But on Purim, the joy is so much, ad de la yoda, until you lose track, until you're no longer conscious. Until you're so inebriated that you actually don't even realize. So you reach the point that you're not even aware.
It's certainly the Kabbalist's favorite cut.
Yeah, but think about this for a moment.
I think to the end would agree. But the other thing with Purim is lots, by definition, is dependent upon God. who determines who the winner is or who the loser is.
So Steve is suggesting that lots are determined upon God. I don't necessarily agree with you because I would think that lots represent randomness, which is the antithesis of God. Whereas God is planned, structure, order, the lot represents.
It's above order.
Okay, now you're getting deep, but let's talk about it on a very fundamental, basic level. On a very basic level, it's like Russian roulette. That's not God. Russian roulette is just randomness, right?
They were playing Yahtzee.
I don't know what Yahtzee is. Okay. Netherlands, welcome back. Okay, look, the way that the Rebbe explains this, Steve, and you're onto something very, very deep, which is beyond the pale of what I think we're going to talk about here today. But on a literal level, when you look at the names of the Jewish holidays, the names of all the other Jewish holidays manifest a miracle. Purim cannot manifest a miracle because there is no overt miracle in the Purim story.
You said there was a miracle yesterday and the day before.
What did I say?
Is when the king was asleep. And he was in this deep, deep, dark sleep, and he woke up and realized about the dream of how Haman is saying.
Again, that was not an overt miracle.
What did I say to him?
It was not an overt miracle. In fact, we need the Gemara to tell us, Steve, that this is the point at the beginning of chapter 5 when you're supposed to raise your voice, because this is the beginning of the miracle. I need the Gemara to tell me that. Why do I need the Gemara to tell me that? Because it's not obvious. Because when I read the verse, it sounds like Achashverosh was sleepless in Shushan. Really, I got to go, diving deep to figure out that it's talking about God who was aroused from his slumber, because it's not overt, it's covert.
But isn't this how they would have Jews actually accepted God?
They came together.
They came together. And
Yes,
accepted God.
on this holiday, the Gemara tells us, Kiyamu Mashi Kiblu Kfar. They accepted, or they fulfilled what they had previously accepted. So in other words, they had already accepted at Mount Sinai at Shavuos 1,000 years prior to commit themselves to an unconditional relationship with God. And now on Purim was when they were actually put to the test, when they were forced, their back against the wall, to choose between their faith or their comfort, and they chose their faith. But still, Toby, we're still not talking about a miracle. There is no miracle in the Purim story, because the theme of Purim is hiddenness. The theme of Purim is concealment. This is why there's no overt miracle. The miracle is covert. What does it mean? It means that God was guiding the matter, the sequence, from behind the scenes. Why was Esther chosen as queen? Why was Vashti executed? Why was it Esther who was chosen? Why was Mordechai the one who happened to overhear the plot to poison the king by Bigsan and Seresh, right? Remember the two cupbearers of the king, the tasters? They wanted to poison the king. Their name were Bigsan and Seresh. And Mordechai happened to know the foreign language of Tarshish that they were talking, and he happened to overhear this decree. So he tells Esther to tell the king that these two guys were trying to poison him. And that was ultimately a very important detail in the story, because when when Achashverosh was sleepless in that night, why was it? He asked them to read him the book of remembrances, and what they kept on reading to him was the miracle, was the fact that Mordechai saved his life, and that Mordechai was never thanked. Right, so that led to the downfall of Haman. It's a series of unlikely events which cannot be called an overt miracle, but in sequence, the likelihood of them coming into play like that is something which you have to marvel at. I spoke about recently about the book of Stephen Behay, which is called Darwin's Black Box. He refutes Darwin by saying that he calls it irreducible complexity. He says that it's simply impossible. Look, he says Darwin says that everything evolved by itself, right? Okay, random. But when you put it all together, the likelihood of it all working like the way it does in perfect synchronicity is just insanely unlikely. He gives an example of a mousetrap. And he says the mousetrap, okay, maybe the hinge could have evolved. Maybe the cheese could have evolved. Maybe the location could have evolved. But to have a mousetrap with a cheese and the spring ready to unleash in the location of where the mouse is normally found, that is irreducible complexity. It makes no sense that all of those details could have worked together in perfect synchronicity to be able to create a mousetrap that actually clears the rodent out of the way. And he uses another example of a snake. He says, why would a serpent need enough venom to kill a horse if he doesn't have the delivery mechanism, the fangs, to be able to do so, right? It's only the fangs together with the amount of venom in the body of a snake, that is irreducible complexity. So when you take all of the sequence of the story of the Purim intrigue, and you realize that yes, independently, it could be that Esther was chosen as queen. And yeah, independently, it could be that Vashti was executed. And independently, it could be that Mordechai overheard. But to have all the sequence of events that ultimately led to the saving of the Jews leads you to conclude that you have to conclude, wow, this is the hidden hand of God. Now, when we realize that that's the theme of the Purim story, puts a lot of things into play. For starters, we begin to understand the reaction of the Jewish leadership. We spoke about this the other day, that the reaction of the Jewish leadership, Mordechai and Esther, even though they were extremely influential people, Mordechai was a very influential advisor of the king, at the gate of the king, the Megillah tells us, and Esther was obviously the queen. Nevertheless, they did not use their influence immediately to influence the king to save the Jews. What they did is that they understood that it's the hidden hand of God at play causing the decree. Therefore, it's our relationship with God that's going to solve the decree. And that's why the first thing Mordechai did is that he went out in sackcloth and ashes, and he did teshuvah. And when the people saw the Rebbe like that, they themselves were inspired to teshuvah. Esther calls for a 3-day fast for herself and her maidens and all the residents of Shushan. They were all doing teshuvah first, understanding that things are not as they seem. This is the theme of Purim, that things are not as they seem, and you have to not judge a book by its cover. You got to be able to see beneath the surface, right? So we've seen the reaction of the Jewish leadership that first they dealt with the core of the issue, which was God coordinating the problem in the first place. And once they rectified their relationship with God, now they were ready for the political diplomacy that they needed to unleash, which is what they did. Esther solicits now the king. But also we see that in the miracle itself. So we see that in the Jewish people's approach, that they understood that it was God hiding behind the scenes that was the problem, and therefore in the miracle or the hidden miracle, we see that the unlikely sequence of events was actually the hidden hand of God. We celebrate this through the theme of hiddenness by not having the name of God revealed in the Megillah. Doesn't say it even once. By having no overt miracle in the Megillah to teach us that everything that happens to us is actually being coordinated by God, right? That God is not only present in the big events of our lives, but God is present even in the small events of our lives. We obviously masquerade in Purim. Why do we masquerade in Purim? Because the theme of Purim is to teach us that things are not as they seem. Looks like Donald Trump just walked into our shul, but really, it's little Moshe, right? Right? And maybe Kamala Harris just walked into our shul too, but it's little Esther Ke that walked in as well, right? 2-year-old Esther Ke walked in with a mask to tell us, it looks so funny that on the outside, it looks like something, but on the inside, we know that it's not that. That's a very important theme. And of course, we deal with that theme in the foods that we eat in Purim as well. The foods of hiddenness. The hamantash. Do we know the word hamantash is the wrong word? It's not called a hamantash. You know that? It's not the real name. The name is not a hamantash. The real name of that food is called a mon tash. Tash means a pocket, and mon is puppy. It's a puppy pocket. It's a pocket of puppy. That's what it's called, a montash. But I think it's hard to say montash. Try to say montash. You can't say it without breathing first. You go, hamantash. Is that interesting? And it kind of made sense, like Haman's the guy. And they're like, yeah, they came up with a story about his ears being triangular. I mean, can you imagine having ears like that? I heard it's his hat. His hat was triangular, but then his ears became triangular. Because tash is tash an ear in Yiddish? Tash. I don't think so. Oznei Haman. In Hebrew, they call it Oznei Haman, the ears of Haman. It doesn't sound very appetizing. But the real name is montash, which means a puppy pocket. And they added the ha just because it's easier to say it with the breath beforehand. Montash is because the puppy is hidden inside of a pocket. So the flavor is inside, not outside. And of course, the other food that we eat in Purim is the kreplach. What's kreplach? Hidden. Kreplach is a pastry with meat inside. How do you say that in English? Dumplings?
Yeah.
Dumpling. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Good. So a dumpling. What's a dumpling? A kreppel. Kreplach. You know kreplach can be said in the singular form. Only plural. Kreplach. You know what? Have one of them. It's not good. Kreplach is good. So what is it? It's the meat. The flavor is hidden inside, right? Now, where are we going with this? It's very, very important. Good morning, Jack. What's very important about this is like this. Is once we begin to apply the Purim story to our personal lives, it becomes deeply inspirational, like very inspirational. Because when you look at the other Jewish holidays, it's sometimes hard to relate to them. You look at the creation of the world in Rosh Hashanah, you're like, okay, I don't have to create the world, so it's fine. And nice to give gratitude to God for creating this world, but okay. You know, Yom Kippur, forgiveness, okay, very nice. Passover. When do you need to break out of Egypt? Okay, it becomes personal when you think about your own Egypt, fine. But what happens with Purim is that, different to the other Jewish holidays that focus on the big moments of our lives and the big events where we need big miracles, Purim is the daily routine. Purim is the ordinary sequence of our lives, infused with the presence of God, hiding behind the scenes, watching, caring, and guiding. It's a very, very powerful concept. And that's why the name of Purim is called Pur, which means randomness. Because Purim inspires the random events of our lives to realize that all of them are also coordinated by God Almighty, and there actually is no such thing as random. You know how you say coincidence in Hebrew? Mikre, M-I-K-R-E, mikre. As I say around coincidence in Hebrew. But in Hebrew, remember, every letter is a number, which can be, like numbers can be moved around in an equation, manipulated. You know, if it's 2 times 3, it could also be 3 times 2. It's the same thing, right? Or 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8. So you can move around the numbers. It's the same thing. It's the same thing in the Hebrew letters. You can move around the letters. So mikre can also be read as rak me Hashem. Rak me Hashem, which means only from God. Or you could read it another way, Hashem Rakam, that God embroidered. God embroidered. What is an embroidery? From the outside, from the back side of an embroidery, it looks awful. It looks like a chaotic mess. But when you go to the front side of the embroidery, it looks beautiful. Everything looks coordinated and exquisite. Because the word mikre coincidence is a code that we need to crack. You need to be able to reconstruct the word in order to understand that God is hidden within the coincidence. And when we do that, every single moment of our lives suddenly becomes meaningful. Because we realize that God is there with us, not only in the big events, when there's a war in Israel, October 7th, Auschwitz, you know, when I got married, when my baby was born. No, God is there on a regular Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. when nothing special is going on. That's when God is with us. Because just like it was in the Purim story, when it was a series of randomness and it seems like God was hidden, ultimately when you read the story in one sequence, one flow from the beginning to the end, you're able to see the unmistakable flow, which was unlikely on its own, its irreducible complexity. In the same way, when you look at our lives as individual points, every individual moment could seem like it's random. But when you look at the flow of your life from one sequence, from beginning to end, if you're able to reflect on the moments of your lives and how it flows in one sequence, you should realize, Purim at least inspires us to realize that Hashem was always there with us. In fact, what does the word Esther mean? Esther means hidden, right? What does Megillah mean? Revealed. Megillah means to reveal. Legalot, Gilui, means revelation. So Megillas Esther means revealing the hidden. That's what the word Megillas Esther means. Revealing the hidden. You know, the first word in the Torah. What's the first word in the Torah? Bereshis. What does Bereshis mean? It's 2 words. Bara means created. And Shis means 6, created 6. Or it could also mean, Shis also means a force placement. Shis is a force placement. Like it says, the Yosef Yoshis Yodo Yalinecha. And Yosef says about to Jacob, and Joseph will place his hands as a covering upon your eyes. It's like a concealment. Bara Shis means that God created a veil. That when God created this world, what we're saying is that God created a concealment. He created a veil. That is the very first word of the Torah. When God introduces himself, the very first thing he's telling us is things will never be as they seem. And your mission as human beings is to be able to remember that there's something going on backstage. What you're looking at is only a play, just a theater. This is the theme of our Purim event, Purim in the theater, because things are not as they seem. It's exactly the theme of our Purim masquerade. That God is telling us, don't get excited or nervous or anxious about the way things seem, because I'm always there with you backstage. There's a beautiful verse in Psalms 139. It's actually, I think it's my favorite Psalm, 139, where King David talks about the transformation of night into day. The Laila kayoim yoir, and night will shine like day. The night will shine like the day, which is a little difficult for us to understand. What is he even talking about? What is King David talking about when he says the night will light up? Like why would the night light up? Chassidus teaches that it's a metaphor. Day is the clear moments of our lives. Day is the moments of our lives where we're happy, where we're filled with faith, where life is good, we're not challenged, we're not afraid, where we feel the presence of God. But night is the opposite. Night is when we're feeling alone and anxious and afraid and vulnerable, and we don't sense the presence of God. And there's a war going on, and what's going to be, and who's going to win, and where are we going to go, and who's going to be our friends, and so on and so forth. There's night and there's day. When King David tells us that the night will shine like the day, what he means to say is that even in the moments of night, of spiritual darkness, there too we will be so full with godly awareness that we will not be afraid. We won't be afraid of the dark. And that, my friends, is the theme of Purim. Purim is about, whereas other Jewish holidays are about celebrating the extraordinary impact of God in our lives, Purim celebrates the ordinary moments of our lives being impacted by God. And that's why it's so personal to us. Purim is such a personal holiday because it wasn't set in biblical times. It was set in relatively modern times. Purim was set in a place where there wasn't a covert miracle that would make us difficult to relate to it. No, it was like what the White House. Purim could have happened in the White House. Think about it. It could have happened in the White House. You had a crazy king, killed his wife, found a Jewish woman. She didn't tell him she was Jewish. Some Louis Farrakhan became the prime minister of America, and then he convinced the president to allow the Jews to be forfeited. Right? I mean, this story could have happened. And as we look at it, we look at October 7th, and we look at the sequence of events that are going in our lives today. With the Houthis today, they're banning Israeli shipping from the Red Sea, and they're threatening to attack. And then, of course, Iran is this constant threat, and there's peace with some sort of peace deal going on with Lebanon, which I don't understand. And there's the Syrians killing each other, and Turkey coming into out of the north with as the axis of evil. It's a little difficult for us to find our balance in these difficult times. We're like, whoa, who's going to be our friends these days, right? But it's the Purim story that reminds us that God is there at every single step of the way. In the poor moments, in the Purim moments, in the randomness moments, in moments that seem so alone, in moments that seem so isolated, that's where God is with us. And that's what's so personal, so inspirational, so real and relatable about the Purim story.
But what comfort can you really take out of there? I mean, what?
Long run, you'll survive.
Right. What comfort you can take out of it is that in the long run, you'll survive.
The comfort you take out of it is that Hashem is here with us all the time.
God is like a stockbroker. He talks about his couple of stocks that he picked that were, winners. He doesn't tell you about all the ones that are the losers. We celebrate
What? So God is a stockbroker who tells you about the good times, not about the bad times?
It's right. We celebrate the ones where it was good. Where
When was it bad?
Purim,
When was it bad?
October 7th, Auschwitz, the Chabad rabbi, who's murdered
In Abu Dhabi.
here.
Look, I'll tell you this, Rob. That the fact of the matter is that we've survived every single war. Think about that. Think about that. We've survived every single war that we have ever faced, and that is something that no other nation in the world is able to say. Think about
I
that.
don't disagree. That's not my point. My point is that I accept God is the plan. He's with us in good or bad. I'm just saying that we tend to celebrate the good and not the bad, and I think we have to be realistic that the end. You're right. Hopefully,
Rob, I disagree with your definition of bad. I disagree with your definition of bad because you're saying that that God is not telling us about the bad times; He's only telling us about the good times.
No,
Nobody gave us a warranty. We never got a warranty that it's going to be easy street. Nobody ever said to us. In fact, we were told the opposite.
So why do we celebrate then the easy ones?
No, we don't celebrate the easy ones. We celebrate when God saved us. That's when we celebrate us. It wasn't easy. It was never easy. Life was never easy. Can you identify one point in Jewish history when life was easy? It was never easy.
It's the old expression. They tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat.
Exactly. Let's look at this interesting comment coming in here from Devoted Husband. Just one thing. Devoted Husband says, if you're going through hell in his life lately, worst situation ever, but I never cursed God or said he isn't real. And I wasn't afraid of the dark, just like you said. Now it's getting better, but even if it got worse, I'd be okay because on the inside, I'm okay. No matter how dark your life is on the outside, with God, it will be as bright as day on the inside. I'm glad that you're able to find your faith, Devoted Husband. That's very nice. Leah says the comfort comes in knowing that Hashem will prevail. Okay, and Devoted Husband said because you're okay. That's what he says. He says at the end of the day because you're okay. Yeah.
I'm talking about majority. How many Jews fasted when Mordecai and Esther told them?
How many Jews fasted? Apparently, all the Jews of Shushan fasted.
Okay.
All the Jews fasted.
Now, how many Jews attended
The Jews of Shushan, by the way.
Shushan.
Yeah.
How many Jews attended?
I don't know how many Jews of Shushan attended the feast. However, there were many. No, they went to the feast in as we learned yesterday in yesterday's class. If you missed it, you can find it on my YouTube. No, I'm saying if anybody here on YouTube missed the class, you'll find it on yesterday's YouTube. But what happened was that they went to the feast. They turned their backs on God. The feast is celebrating the death of the Jewish God. And they went to that feast, which was a terrible stab in the back of God Almighty. This was their teshuvah, their repentance. They fasted subsequently.
Did they know what the feast was about?
Of course they knew what the feast was about.
So why would they attend?
Because they were turning their backs on God. Just like today. What would happen if Washington, D.C., if the president of America made a feast to celebrate the death of Israel? How many Jews would attend the feast?
So, but first
A lot of Jews would go. What?
First they fasted, and then the same people many of the same people attended the feast.
Yeah, because they had a turn of heart.
No,
They were sinners in the beginning, and then they became about teshuvah. They repented. They woke up. What's wrong with that? Why are you surprised?
They're hedging their bets. They're hedging their bets.
The thing is, as far as I can tell, when you have something very, very bad, there's always something good in that bad.
Really?
Always. My mother told me that and told my brother and sister that many times. A perfect example of watching my father had a picture of his parents being shot by the Germans and thrown in a hole. Okay? But the good part is they really didn't go to the concentration camp and suffer and everything.
Oh, that's a painful story. But I wanted you to conclude, guys. Guys, I just want to conclude. Guys, I want to conclude with the meditation. Ed, I just want to conclude with the meditation, guys. I want
The guy was shot instead of stabbed.
Rob, I just want to conclude with the meditation here, okay? Here's what I want to do. I'd like to encourage you to make Purim great again. I want to encourage you to make Purim great again and to do it like this. Folks, let's move away. This Purim, I want you to move away from focusing on the children this Purim. You know, we tend to say, Purim is all about the children dressing up and aren't they cute and give them candies. No, the kids are also part of the Purim story, but the main character of the Purim story is the mature adults that are struggling and grappling with darkness and challenges and illness and relationships and other anxiety-inducing experiences of their lives. And as we read the Megillah this Purim, I want to encourage you to make sure to go to shul and to hear the Megillah tomorrow night and Thursday night, as well as on Friday during the daytime, to be able to experience the 4 mitzvahs of Purim, which are gifts of food to a fellow Jew, 2 gifts of money to a poor person, and hearing the Megillah night and day, and also having a feast on Purim. Because when you experience that, and when you drink on Purim, and you should be drinking in Purim, not in excess, but you should be drinking. When you drink in Purim, I want you to reach, what does it mean to reach a state that you don't know? What does it mean to reach a state of adla yada, to reach a state of inebriation? It means to rise above your existing paradigms. That's what it means. It means to break yourself free from the box that you put yourself in. I'm never going to be rich. I'm never going to be happy. I'm never going to have a wholesome relationship with my loved ones. I'm never going to be a great dad. I'm never going to be a great wife or husband. I'm never going to be a great Jew. Stop it already. Break yourself free. Rise above. Reach a state of non-consciousness where you're free from those paradigms. Drink yourself up to a point where you're able to celebrate the presence of God, the presence of miracles in every single moment of your life. And I wanted to conclude with an amazing story that I had. I met the son-in-law of Bob Dylan a few weeks ago in Simcha Monica, California. I met him. His name is Peter Himmelman. So I had a chat with him, and I said to him, is it true? Well, he told me a story about himself. He said that when he was starting his journey towards Chabad, Peter Himmelman, he was talking to a great Chabad rabbi by the name of Rabbi Simon Jacobson. He wrote a book called Towards Meaningful Life, and others. He's a very, very great thinker. Now, he asked Rabbi Simon Jacobson why he has a picture of the Rebbe in his house, and why Hasidim generally have a picture of the Rebbe everywhere. So Rabbi Jacobson was late at night, and Rabbi Jacobson said to him, because the Rebbe is a Tzadik, he's a righteous man, holy man. Really? Said Peter. Well, can the Rebbe fly? So Rabbi Jacobson said yes. So Peter was incredulous. The Rebbe can fly? Really? So he said, Rabbi Jacobson explained that for a tzaddik, even when he walks on solid earth, he knows that he's flying in the hands of God. There is no such thing as an ordinary moment for a tzaddik. For a man as righteous as the Rebbe, walking on earth is just as miraculous as walking on air, because he knows that God is there for him, not only in the moments that are extraordinary, but God is there with them even in the moments that are ordinary. In this Purim, let us try to find a deeper relationship with God. A relationship with God that is present not only when you're in shul, but even when you're at home. A relationship with God not only when you're in your holy conscious moments, but even when you're down in the dumps, even when you're scared, anxious, and afraid. To be able to find the comfort to know that God is with you, even in the most random moments, the Purim moments. To know that you're never alone and God is just hiding. And that if you could just remember to see through the veil, Bereshis, see through the veil, peer backstage, we will be comforted with the awareness that God is with us always and we are never alone. Thank you very much.
Rabbi.